Welcome to this trip through one of the most terrifying cases ever recorded in the Smoky Mountains. Before we start, please leave a comment with where you are and what time you are listening to this narration. We want to know where these written accounts go and what times of day or night they reach. In the fall, the wind howls through the pines in Tennessee's Smoky Mountains in a certain way. People who have heard it say that it echoes not animals or storms, but something else. 5 men went into the Blackwood mine in the fall of 1879, which was near the town of Cades Cove. All official records say that none of them ever came out. People have been guessing about what happened in those tunnels for decades. Isaiah, Elijah, and Jeremiah Blackwood, along with 2 hired men named Thomas Green and Frederick Walsh, disappeared without a trace. The Tennessee Mining Authority closed off the mine in 1962, and it has been sealed off ever since. It may be best to leave some secrets buried. The settlement of Cades Cove is in a valley surrounded by the Smoky Mountains' steep ridges. About 300 people lived there in 1879. They were farmers, tradespeople, and miners who made a living in the harsh landscape. The Blackwood family had lived there for 3 generations. They eventually bought land on the northwestern slope of what locals called Hollow Ridge, which had promising mineral deposits. The name came from the strange sounds that seemed to disappear in the area, which were absorbed by the thick forest and strange rock formations. Nathaniel, the head of the Blackwood family, was a poor farmer who moved to the area in 1817. County land records show that he got the first piece of land as a government land grant after serving in the War of 1812. His oldest son, Abraham, bought neighboring properties from neighbors who wanted to move west in the 1832nd and 1842nd, which increased the family's holdings. Abraham was the first to notice the strange black stones that sometimes appeared after heavy rains. These stones were heavier and shinier than regular coal. During the Civil War, Abraham Blackwood died in 1862. Isaiah, Elijah, and Jeremiah, his 3 sons, got the land and his doubts about what might be underneath it. The war and the economic problems that followed slowed down their investigations, but by 1875 the brothers had saved enough money to start digging. Isaiah Blackwood, who was 38 years old at the time, was described in county records as a man who was serious and had big plans. His marriage to Elizabeth Carmichael in 1865 linked the family to richer people in Knoxville, giving them both social connections and possible investors. Elizabeth didn't go to the mine site very often because she liked to stay at their more comfortable home in town. The couple didn't have any kids, which caused problems, as Elizabeth wrote to her sister in private letters that are now kept in the Knoxville Historical Society archives. Elijah, 34, and Jeremiah, 29, were both hard workers, but they were more reserved. Neither of them had gotten married. People in the area say that they were completely dedicated to the family business, working from dawn to well after dusk. Jeremiah, the youngest, had gone to college in Nashville before the war stopped his studies. He wrote to a number of professors and was known to read scientific journals by lamplight. The Blackwood Mining Company was officially founded in 1876 after several promising coal veins were found, but local stories say that the brothers were looking for something else entirely. It looks like the coal was just a way to make money for their real goal. The Blount County Register from the 12th of June, 1879, says that Isaiah Blackwood had gone all the way to Knoxville to find investors for a business he said would make record profits. Public records never said what kind of returns these were. When pushed, he becomes evasive, saying only that those who commit now will be richly rewarded when the full extent of the discovery becomes known. In August 1879, port records show that the brothers hired Thomas Green, 42, a mining engineer from Pennsylvania who had worked in the anthracite regions before, and Frederick Walsh, 36, a well-known geologist who had worked as a consultant for railway companies before. Their contracts, which were kept in the Blount County Courthouse until a fire damaged parts of the archive in 1963, called for unusually high pay, almost 3 times the normal rate for similar jobs. James Harrington, a possible investor, wrote in his business journal, "Blackwood speaks with conviction, but remains frustratingly vague about the specific mineral deposits. More importantly, both contracts had long confidentiality clauses that included harsh penalties for revealing any information about the mining operation. What were the Blackwood brothers willing to pay so much for, and why did they need more than just coal mining skills? Martha Trentham wrote in her personal journal from 1905, "But there was always something strange about that ridge. Josiah Trentham owned the property next door, and Martha was his wife. The Blackwoods didn't talk much about their business, but my Josiah said he saw strange equipment being brought up there. Not just mining tools, but crates with words he didn't know on them, maybe scientific instruments. Isaiah would only say that they were measuring things." Martha's journal, which was found during the 1958 renovation of the old Trentham homestead, is one of the few first-hand accounts from someone not involved in the Blackwood operation. She talks about a dinner in late August 1879, when the Blackwoods had their new experts over. Mr. Green seemed like a nice enough guy, even though he was tired from his trip. Walsh, on the other hand, barely spoke during the meal, but watched everything like a hawk. What struck me most was how the three brothers listened to him on some things, even though they never took advice from anyone. She goes on, "After dinner, Isaiah showed them something wrapped in cloth. I couldn't see what it was, but the reaction was immediate. Mr. Walsh almost dropped his glass, and Mr. Green kept asking where they'd found it. Jeremiah said something about the lower seam, and Elijah quickly told him to be quiet. They noticed me then, and Isaiah put whatever it was back in his pocket." The conversation turned to everyday things, but the mood had changed completely. The operation really got started. By the end of summer 1879, workers from Cades Cove and nearby towns were hired to build the first shaft and the structures that would hold it up. According to payroll records found in 1953, these local men only did surface work. Once digging started in September, none of them were allowed to go into the mine. In 1925, when he was 79 years old, Silas Cooper, a carpenter who helped build the mine's outbuildings, gave a statement to the Maryville Times. They were picky about that mine entrance. "Mr. Isaiah made us build it twice," he said. "They said the first one wasn't right. It had to have these heavy doors that sealed tight. They said it was for safety, but I never saw a coal mine that needed doors like that. They looked more like a bank vault than a mine shaft." Cooper's story goes on. There was a second building about 50 yards from the main entrance. It was small but strong, with no windows and just a heavy door with a serious lock. We called it the strong room. Mr. Elijah personally oversaw the construction, checking every nail and board. He wouldn't say what it was for, but we brought in some really strange equipment. Brass instruments with dials, glass containers, and things I'd never seen before or since. Daniel McCoy, another worker, said in the same article, "They had us dig a pit behind that strong room, line it with brick, 8 feet deep, circular like a well but dry. They put a metal plate at the bottom and some kind of machinery on top. Looked like something you'd see at a university, not a mining operation. When I asked Mr. Jeremiah about it, he just said it was for processing samples. But I've worked coal mines before, and that wasn't like any processing I ever seen." The operation had become more secretive by October 1879. The local workers were let go, leaving only the Blackwood brothers, Green, and Walsh. Abernathy's General Store in Cades Cove has a record of the last known delivery of supplies on October 23rd. The purchase included a lot of kerosene, salt, and blank journals, as well as regular mining supplies. Abernathy's ledger, which was kept by the storekeeper's descendants and given to the Tennessee Historical Commission in 1971, has a note in the margin next to this entry that says, J.B. Jeremiah Blackwood, looking unwell, thin, eyes sunken, hands shaking so badly he could hardly sign the receipt. When asked, he said he wasn't sleeping well and mentioned noises in the walls of his room. Joseph Miller, who brought mail to the mine office once a week, found the site completely empty on the 17th of November, 1879. The door to the office was open, and papers were strewn across the floor, as if someone had been in a hurry. There was still a lantern lit on the desk. The entrance to the mine was locked from the inside on purpose, not collapsed. Miller's sworn statement to the Blount County Sheriff talks about a feeling of wrongness that made the hair stand up on my neck, like the air itself was holding its breath. His full statement, which is only partially included in the official record but is kept in his family Bible with a note that it was the truth, though the sheriff wouldn't write it all down, gives more information. The door to the strong room was open, but nothing seemed out of place inside. There were papers with numbers and drawings on them that I couldn't make sense of. A glass case held rocks that were black but had flecks that seemed to move when I looked at them from different angles. The most strange thing was the brick pit behind the building. The machinery was gone, but the metal plate was still there. It was covered in scratches, as if something had tried to claw its way up from below. At best, the sheriff's investigation was a waste of time. The official report from the 25th of November 1879 says, "The Blackwood brothers and their associates seem to have stopped mining for reasons that are not clear. There were no signs of violence or foul play. The property has been secured until rightful claimants come forward." This clinical evaluation does not rectify several discrepancies. Why would successful business people leave behind useful tools? Why hadn't they fed their horses in days? Why was there still a half-eaten meal on the office table? And the most confusing thing of all is why the mine was sealed from the inside. Deputy Samuel Lockwood, who helped with the investigation, later told his son, as recorded in the Lockwood family history, compiled in 1923, Sheriff didn't want to go inside that mine. None of us did, truth be told. There was a feeling about the place, like standing at the edge of a deep pit in the dark. You can't see what's below, but you sense the emptiness. We reported what we could see and left the rest alone. Some places are best left undisturbed. In December 1879, Green's family came from Pennsylvania, and Walsh's family came from Massachusetts. The bureaucrats didn't care about their questions. The case was called a simple disappearance because there were no bodies, no proof of a crime, and no witnesses. The mine property was stuck in legal limbo because no heirs came forward to claim the Blackwood estate. The missing engineer's 16-year-old daughter, Sarah Green, wrote a diary while she was in Tennessee. She wrote in an entry dated December 12, 1879, "Mother keeps asking the sheriff for answers, but he has none to give or none he will share. Today we went to the mine site, even though officials told us not to. The forest seems to close around it, as if trying to reclaim the space and erase what happened there. I felt a heaviness in the air and a pressure behind my eyes. Mother called me fanciful, but she seemed eager to leave too." Near the sealed entrance, I found a scrap of paper that might have been from Father's notebook. It said in his hand, "It responds to sound." God help us, it responds to sound. Elizabeth Blackwood, Isaiah's wife, wouldn't go to Cades Cove because she was sure her husband would call her when he could. She told her lawyer that she thought the brothers had found something valuable and were hiding to keep it safe. She didn't start a search or file a missing persons report. In 1881, she moved to Charleston, South Carolina. She never married again, and when she died in 1914, she left her small estate to a nephew. Her will did not mention her husband. In 1880, Reverend William McNeil wrote in his parish records for the Cades Cove Methodist Church, "The locals wouldn't go near that place. They say you can hear things coming from inside the sealed mine at night, but not cave-ins or settling earth something else." I tell them not to believe in superstitions, but I have to admit that when I went to the site to pray for the missing men, I felt very uneasy too. The silence there has weight to it. The Methodist Historical Society has transcribed and preserved McNeil's records, which include another entry from June 1880. Josiah Trentham says that the Blackwood horses, which were sold at auction to pay off debts, have all died or gone lame. Tools and equipment from the mine, which are now spread out around the community, also seem to bring bad luck. Daniel McCoy's saw, which he bought from the liquidation, broke and almost cut off his hand. The lantern from the office, which Adam Lawson now owns, won't light even though it has plenty of oil. These stories make people superstitious, which I don't want to do, but the pattern is hard to ignore. Howard Reynolds, an ambitious graduate student from the University of Tennessee, might have completely forgotten about the Blackwood mine. While writing his doctoral thesis in 1952 about how mining was done in the Appalachian Mountains, Reynolds came across mentions of the Blackwood disappearance. He was interested in the strange event from the past, so he started gathering documents, talking to older people who lived in the area, and putting together the pieces of the story. Reynolds' research notes, which are kept at the University of Tennessee Library, show that he became increasingly obsessed with the case. He wrote in March 1953, "The official explanation doesn't make sense. The Blackwoods were experienced business people who had put a lot of money into their business. The sudden abandonment goes against everything we know about their character and circumstances. Also, the geological surveys I've looked at show that the Hollow Ridge site shouldn't have had any significant coal deposits at all. So, what were they mining?" Reynolds found Sarah Green, who by then was an old woman living in Philadelphia. The notes he took during her interview give a disturbing picture. Father was not prone to flights of fancy. He was a practical man, methodical in his work and his thinking, but his letters changed after he arrived in Tennessee. At first, he wrote of promising findings and a cordial working relationship with the Blackwoods. By September, his tone had shifted. He mentioned unusual properties in the mineral samples and disagreements about how to proceed. His final letter, received just days before the disappearance, contained a passage that has haunted me all these years. "We've gone too deep. The material changes as we descend." It's not just a mineral deposit. It's something else entirely. Isaiah won't stop despite the warnings. He believes we found something that will change everything. I fear he may be right, though not in the way he imagines. The Tennessee Department of Conservation gave Reynolds permission to visit the abandoned mine site on the 12th of June 1953. By then, the site had become part of the newly established Great Smoky Mountains National Park. His notes from that day said that the forest had taken back the remains of buildings, the mine entrance was still visible but had fallen down, and he found something strange. A metal container buried under the rotting floorboards of what had been the mine office. The container had a leather-bound journal inside, but the pages were mostly unreadable because of time and moisture. Still, some parts were still readable. The handwriting looked like Isaiah Blackwood's signature on file in the county. Reynolds wrote down what he could. October 8, 1879. FW confirms our suspicions about the sample's strange properties. The mineral has properties that don't match those of any known element. When exposed to certain conditions, it shows amazing effects that I don't want to go into detail about even in these private pages. We have agreed to be careful. October 11th, 1879. The tunnel is now 220 feet long. The vein gets wider as we go deeper. TG says that the temperature changes are strange and can't be explained by normal geology. The instruments back this up. We are on the right track. October 17th, 1879. Jeremiah went through the episode again last night. He said he could hear them moving in the walls of his room, but we didn't hear anything. I'm worried that being so close to the samples is having an effect. We've moved the specimens to a secure chamber in the main shaft. October 21st, 1879. The sounds are no longer subjective. All 5 of us heard them today, not cave-ins or settling, something else. FW suggests we seal the lower chamber and suspend operations. E disagrees vehemently. The potential value is too great to abandon. The last clear entry, from the 15th of November, 1879, 2 days before the mine was found empty, has only one line. It is too late. They are coming through. Reynolds became sure that the Blackwoods had found something new, like a new mineral or gas with strange properties. He thought that being around this substance might have caused hallucinations, paranoia, or other mental problems that led to tragedy. The men could have gotten lost, had accidents in the mine, or even fought each other. His notes from late June 1953 describe a number of interviews he did with older people who remembered stories about Hollow Ridge. Emma Davis, who was 91 at the time of the interview, remembered stories her grandmother told her. The Cherokee wouldn't camp there. They said the ground was wrong. It didn't hold sound right. Even now, birds don't sing there. It's always been a quiet place, but not the peaceful kind of quiet, the hungry kind. William Trentham, Josiah and Martha's grandson, told stories about the Blackwoods. My grandparents said Isaiah changed after they dug that first shaft. He used to be friendly, but then he became withdrawn. Once, my grandfather heard him tell Elijah, "It's like looking through a window into somewhere else." They thought he meant a metaphor for wealth or opportunity, but later they weren't so sure. In July 1953, Reynolds asked for permission to dig out the entrance to the mine that had fallen down. Park officials turned down his application because they were worried about safety. He didn't give up and kept looking into the strange geological features of Hollow Ridge and any historical accounts of similar events in the area. Reynolds wrote in his research diary that he called the United States Geological Survey in August 1953 to ask about any strange mineral deposits or geological anomalies that had been found in the Smoky Mountains area. The response he got with his papers was short and to the point. No significant atypical formations or minerals have been officially recorded at the coordinates you provided. Only standard coal deposits and typical Appalachian geological features. But Reynolds pointed out a problem. USGS records show that a geological survey took place in the Hollow Ridge area in 1882, 3 years after the Blackwood event. The report is in the catalog, but not in the archives. When I asked about this, I was told that the document was probably lost when the office moved in the 1920 seconds. How convenient. During September 1953, Reynolds broadened his search by writing to mining historians, geologists, and archivists all over the eastern United States. His letters became more and more urgent, often mentioning time limits and worries about outside interference. He wrote to his faculty advisor on September 30th, "I think I'm being followed. I've seen the same man near the library twice this week when I'm going over the Blackwood materials. Yesterday my apartment showed signs of entry, but nothing was taken. I've put my most important findings in a safe deposit box. If anything happens, please make sure this research goes on." Reynolds himself went missing. In October 1953, Reynolds' roommate at the university said that he left their apartment on the night of October 17th, saying he had made a breakthrough and needed to go to the library to check something. He never came back. 3 days later, his car was found parked on a service road in the national park, about 2 miles from the Blackwood mine site. Park rangers and local officials searched for Reynolds for a long time, but they never found any evidence of him. The official report said that Reynolds probably had an accident while hiking in the rough terrain, maybe falling into a ravine or getting lost in the thick forest. But the way he disappeared is eerily similar to the case that had been taking up all of his time. Dr. Marilyn Haywood, a geology professor who had given Reynolds advice in the past, told university officials, "Howard was very careful in his planning and very good at navigating in the backcountry. The idea that he would hike into difficult terrain at dusk without being ready goes against everything I knew about him." Also, he had told me about some worries he had about his research that I first thought were just academic paranoia. Now, I wonder if there was more to his fears than I realized. There was never an official record of what these concerns were about. However, a partially finished version of Reynolds' thesis that was found among his things has a disturbing note in the margin that says, "The geographical anomalies extend beyond the mine site." Testing indicates a radius of influence that continues to expand. The implications are staggering. If confirmed, the question is no longer what the Blackwoods found, but whether they release something that cannot be contained. The Tennessee Mining Authority did surveys of abandoned mine sites all over the state in 1962 as part of a program to reduce hazards. The Blackwood mine, which is now just a hole in the hillside, was officially closed with concrete on the 17th of November, 1962, exactly 83 years to the day after Joseph Miller found it abandoned. Robert Crowley, the foreman of the sealing operation, added an unusual note to his standard report. Crew members reported hearing strange noises while working at the Blackwood site. Several complained of headaches and confusion. The foreman recommends no further activity at this location. When his bosses asked for more information, Crowley quit. In the next month, he and his family moved to Ohio. We couldn't get in touch with him for this investigation. James Watkins, one of Crowley's workers, gave an interview to a journalist in 1967 who was looking into the history of mining in the Appalachian region. He said, "We all heard it, like whispering coming from inside the hillside. Not words exactly, but something trying to sound like words. Robert got it worst." He was operating the concrete mixer closest to the opening and started complaining that his skin felt wrong, like something was moving underneath it. By lunchtime, he was seeing things that weren't there. Crowley sent him home and finished the job himself. The next morning, Robert couldn't remember anything about the day before. Doctors said it was heat exhaustion, but it was October, cool and cloudy. The story of the Blackwood mine was hidden away in archives and local legends for decades. In the spring of 1967, a new discovery at the University of Pennsylvania brought the case back into the news. When alumni records were being sorted, a number of letters were found among the personal belongings of Thomas Green, the mining engineer who went missing with the Blackwoods. These letters from Green to Professor William Harrison between July and October 1879 give us the most information we've had so far about what the Blackwood operation might have really been about. The last letter, dated the 12th of October 1879, says in part, "The properties of this mineral defy conventional explanation. It responds to electrical current in ways I've never witnessed, and samples in proximity to one another seem to maintain a kind of resonance, regardless of distance. Isaiah thinks we've found something revolutionary, and Walsh agrees, but he's more cautious in his assessment. The brothers have started calling it black iron even though it doesn't look like iron. The physical effects are more worrying. After handling it for a long time, my fingers go numb for hours." Walsh's right hand has developed a constant tremor. Young Jeremiah says he hears voices when no one is speaking. At first, we thought this was because of the mine's acoustic properties, but now I'm not so sure. Isaiah doesn't care about these concerns. He's getting more and more focused on reaching the main deposit. "Something about this place feels wrong, Harrison. If it weren't for our contractual obligations and the truly strange nature of our findings, I would have left weeks ago. The locals wouldn't go near the mine, but they won't say why. I've heard rumors about the ridge, that the Cherokee stayed away from it, and that animals won't den there. I'm sure that's true, but in my darker moments, I believe it. We've sealed the lower shaft, where the main vein runs deepest. Only the 5 of us can get in. I don't want to write down what we found there, but I will say that the material becomes more concentrated as we go down and its properties become more pronounced. Isaiah is sure we're getting close to something unprecedented, which he calls the source. I've secured samples for independent analysis. They're sealed in lead containers, which seems to dampen their unusual properties. I plan to send them to you within the fortnight, along with my complete notes. If anything delays this correspondence, I trust you will make appropriate inquiries. The University of Pennsylvania never got any samples or more letters. When Professor Harrison didn't hear from his colleague, he did ask questions, but as we've seen, the official investigation was at best half-hearted. Most of Harrison's letters to officials in Tennessee, which are kept in university archives, went unanswered. Harrison's personal journal, which was found among his things after he died in 1907, shows that he went to Tennessee himself in the early 1882. His entry from January 18th says, "The local authorities are either incompetent or deliberately obstructive. They show no interest in pursuing the matter beyond their initial cursory investigation." When I mentioned Green's final letter and its references to unusual mineral properties, Sheriff Davis became visibly uncomfortable and suggested I return to Pennsylvania and leave Tennessee matters to Tennessons. A later entry from the 21st of January 1880 shows Harrison's anger. "Visited the mine site today, despite warnings to stay away. The entrance has indeed been sealed from within, with huge timbers braced against the doors. There are no signs of violence or struggle, but the scene suggests a hasty departure." Most strange was the silence, a deep absence of sound that seemed to extend in a perfect circle around the site. There was no bird song, no insect noise, and not even the sound of wind in the trees, though I could see branches moving. I collected soil samples from near the mine entrance for analysis. His last entry about the trip, dated the 25th of January 1880, said, "Samples proved unremarkable under initial testing. However, I experienced a most disturbing phenomenon last night. The soil was stored in my hotel room in glass vials. I was awakened by what sounded like faint tapping from within the containers. When examined by lamplight, the soil appeared to be moving slightly, though I could detect no insects or other organisms that might explain the movement. I have disposed of the samples and will depart for Pennsylvania tomorrow. Some mysteries, perhaps, are best left unsolved. Most scholars have dismissed the Blackwood incident as an industrial accident, possibly involving pockets of natural gas that could explain both the disappearances and the reported auditory and psychological disturbances. People think that the brothers and their friends fled after a terrible event, which is why there are no bodies. However, this theory doesn't explain why they would seal the mine from the inside or leave all of their belongings behind. More obscure interpretations have appeared in niche publications. Some people think that the black iron could have been radioactive material that made people mentally ill when they came into contact with it. Some people suggest more unusual explanations that involve things that science doesn't yet understand. These ideas would seem silly if it weren't for the fact that the case was so strange and the pattern of disappearances it created. Dr. Richard Chambers, a physicist who was interested in strange events, wrote a monograph in 1959 that was only published privately. It tried to link the Blackwood case to other cases of strange disappearances and unusual geological features. He wrote, "What the Blackwoods may have discovered is evidence of what I call thin places. Places where the normal properties of physical space become flexible. Indigenous peoples around the world have stories about these places, which are often described as doorways to other realms. With its ideas of quantum entanglement and multiple dimensions, modern physics may be getting closer to a way to explain these things scientifically." Most academics didn't pay much attention to Chambers' work, and he eventually lost his job at his university. No one knows where he went after that. The Miskatonic University Library's special collections hold the only copy of his monograph that the public can see. The last living person who was directly involved in the Blackwood case died in 1968. Sarah Green, Thomas Green's daughter, died in a nursing home in Philadelphia at the age of 92. Staff said that in her last days, she talked a lot about her father. She would say things like, "They're still in there. They're still listening. The walls got too thin at Hollow Ridge." A nurse's note in her medical file from 3 days before she died says something strange happened. Mrs. Green became very upset around midnight, insisting she could hear her father calling to her. She said he was on the other side of the wall and needed help to come back through. When I tried to reassure her that she was safe in the nursing home, she became lucid for a moment and said, "It's November 17th again. They always reach out on November 17th. I reminded her it was actually April 23rd. She shook her head and said, "Time moves differently where they are." The Blackwood mine site is now in an undeveloped part of Great Smoky Mountains National Park. Natural overgrowth has made it hard to find the exact spot where the concrete seal was put in place in 1962. Park rangers say that hiking off the trail is dangerous because of the rough terrain and the delicate ecosystems that live there. But hikers sometimes say they have strange things happen near Hollow Ridge. Park Service records show that many visitors have become confused for a short time, heard strange sounds, or felt sudden anxiety or fear. These reports are all around the old mine site, within about 2 miles. Several hikers have needed help after getting lost from their groups for no clear reason, but none have gone missing for good. As part of a larger study of Appalachian mineral compositions, Dr. Eleanor Matt, a geology professor at Vanderbilt University, took soil and rock samples from the area in 1956. Her published papers don't mention any strange things, but her private research notes, which were made public after she retired, tell a different story. Samples from Site BW7, which is thought to be a coded reference to the Blackwood location, show strange electromagnetic properties that need to be looked into more. A request for funding is pending. There were never any more studies done. Dr. Matt's request for money was turned down, so she gave up that line of research completely. When investigators looking into the Reynolds disappearance contacted her in 1967, she wouldn't talk about what she had found. She only said, "Some doors are better left closed, but Tennessee authorities made the right decision to seal that place permanently." In 1968, a former graduate assistant who worked with Dr. Matt but didn't want to be named gave more information. The samples from Hollow Ridge were unlike anything else we studied. They seemed to absorb light in a way that defied explanation. More disturbing were the audio recordings we made during the testing process. When played back at high volume, you could hear something that sounded like voices, not recording artifacts, but actual voices speaking words that almost made sense. Dr. Matt destroyed the tapes after listening to them repeatedly for several days. She became convinced they were saying specific things to her personally. That's when she shut down the research. A team from the United States Geological Survey did a full mapping project in the Great Smoky Mountains National Park in 1963. Their published reports have a major flaw. A circular area about 4 miles in diameter centered on Hollow Ridge is marked as topography unverified due to instrument malfunction. The official documents do not explain why this is the case. Dr. James Collins, who was on the USGS team, went on to become a professor at the University of Michigan. In a 1972 interview for an academic journal, he briefly talked about the omission. Some areas of the park were hard to map because the equipment that worked perfectly in other places didn't work well in some areas. Instead of publishing data that might not be accurate, we chose to admit that our survey had limitations. When asked specifically about Hollow Ridge, Collins reportedly ended the interview right away. The reporter said that Collins's hands started to shake when the place was brought up. What should we think about this broken history? 5 men went into a mine in 1879 and never came out. 74 years later, a researcher looking into their story went missing in the same place. People who were sealing the mine said they saw strange things. Scientists who were studying the area stopped their work for reasons that aren't clear. The pattern points to something that can't be explained in a normal way, but it doesn't give us any clear answers. The Blackwood Mine is still an odd case in history because the facts don't lead to a clear conclusion. The words that Frederick Walsh, the geologist, is said to have said to a local shopkeeper days before he went missing are probably the most disturbing. We've breached something down there that we don't understand. Isaiah thinks it's a mineral deposit, but I'm no longer sure it's a thing at all. It might be a place, a thin spot, and now that we've opened it, I don't think it can be closed again. Abigail Lawson, the shopkeeper, wrote this memory down in a letter to her sister on the 10th of November, 1879. She said Walsh looked pale and shaky, like a man who hasn't slept in days. When she asked him more questions, he allegedly said, "Some things weren't meant to be found. Some spaces weren't meant to be entered." In the years after the event, a number of families left Cades Cove, saying they had concerns about the area that they didn't want to talk about. By 1881, the number of people living there had dropped by almost 20%. Church records from that time show that there were more prayer meetings and community gatherings that were all about keeping people safe from hidden forces. A petition signed by 47 people in December 1879 and sent to the county government is a very important document that was found in the Cades Cove Baptist Church's archives in 1964. It asks that the Blackwood Mine be permanently closed and the land be declared unfit for living or building on. The petition says that strange things have happened more often since the mine was closed. For example, livestock have been found dead with no marks or cause. Kids have talked about seeing figures at the edge of the forest, and people have heard sounds that call in voices that are familiar to each person. Even though the speakers are known to be elsewhere or dead, county records show that the petition was received, but no action was taken other than to note that it had been filed for consideration. Most of the people who signed the petition had moved away from the area within 6 months. People who lived in the Appalachian Mountains for a long time had superstitions about certain places. For example, they thought that hollows where sounds carried strangely, ridges where animals wouldn't graze, and caves that seemed to breathe on their own were strange. People usually think of these beliefs as myths or as things that happen in nature that small groups of people who don't know much about science get wrong. The Blackwood case, on the other hand, is different. It is recorded in county records, corporate filings, personal letters, and academic research. The fact that educated, rational men, engineers, and businessmen have gone missing instead of superstitious locals suggests that there is more to the story than mountain legends. After the Blackwood disappearance, land records show an interesting detail. No one tried to claim ownership of Hollow Ridge for decades, even though the property could have been worth a lot and the law was unclear about the brothers' estate. Because of unpaid taxes, the land eventually went back to the county, and it was later added to the national park. Hollow Ridge stayed the same even when timber and mining companies were aggressively buying up land in Appalachia to develop resources. In 1927, the Eastern Tennessee Coal and Timber Corporation sent people out to look at possible purchases all over the area. Their internal report, which is now kept in the corporate archives at the University of Tennessee, has a short but important note about the old Blackwood property. Site deemed unsuitable for development, despite favorable geological indicators. Local labor refuses to work the location. Recommend seeking alternative sites. What did the Blackwood brothers discover under Hollow Ridge? What kinds of things did their black iron have? Did they break into a natural pocket of gas or radiation that made them see things, feel paranoid, and eventually die? Or did they, as Walsh said, open something that couldn't be closed again? Park Service workers found an unusual feature about a mile from the old mine site in 1965 while doing normal forest management work. It was a perfect circle of dead plants that was about 30 feet wide. Soil tests showed that there were no harmful substances or germs that could explain the event. The official report ends with the simple statement, "Cause undetermined." Area to be monitored for changes or expansion. A follow-up inspection in 1966 found that the circle had grown to 35 feet in diameter. It was 40 feet wide by 1967. There are no public records of photographs of the site, which is strange because standard documentation procedures for ecological anomalies usually include them. There are no public park maps that show where the place is. The mining authority put a concrete seal in place in 1962, and it has never been broken. No more digging has been done. Howard Reynolds' research notes are in the University of Tennessee's archives, but only certain scholars with the right credentials and permission from the university can see them. The Great Smoky Mountains National Park does not have any official records of the mine in its public historical materials. An internal memo from the Department of the Interior in 1965, which was obtained through a Freedom of Information Act request in 1988, is perhaps the most telling piece of evidence. It was about the former mining site at coordinates that were redacted within GSMNP boundaries. It said all inquiries should be directed to the regional office. No unauthorized research or excavation is permitted at this location. Ranger patrols of the area should be conducted in pairs and limited to daylight hours. The memo does not explain why these unusual precautions were taken. When asked about the restrictions in 1988, department officials said they were because of unstable ground and possible environmental risks from mining practices in the 1800s. Michael Gaines, a former park ranger who worked in the Great Smoky Mountains National Park from 1963 to 1969, gave more information in a 2001 interview for a regional historical journal. There were places in the park we were told to avoid, or to approach only with specific protocols in place. Hollow Ridge was one of them. The official line was safety concerns due to old mining operations, but the precautions seemed excessive for typical hazards. We were instructed never to hike there alone and to carry two-way radios at all times, equipment that wasn't standard issue for most park areas in those days. Gaines continued, "In the summer of '67, I was assigned to patrol the ridge with another ranger, David Chen. About a mile from the old mine site, we found a clearing that wasn't on any of our maps, a perfect circle, maybe 40 feet across, completely devoid of vegetation. The ground felt strange underfoot, vibrating slightly, almost humming. Dave said he could hear whispering, though I heard nothing. We reported it. When we returned to headquarters the next day, a team from the regional office arrived and cordoned off the entire area. We were reassigned to other sectors, and I never heard an official explanation. People who have hiked near Hollow Ridge in the last few decades say that the area is very quiet and seems to absorb sound. The wind stops, and the birds stop singing. Some say they feel like someone is watching them from the thick undergrowth. Most people think these impressions are just the power of suggestion, with the mind making patterns where there aren't any because of what they know about the area's history. But the pattern keeps going. The silence, the disappearances, the sealed mine that no one seems to want to look into. the researchers who stop looking into things, and the subtle warnings that go through official channels. Dr. Lillian Hart, a geophysicist who tried to do a ground-penetrating radar survey of the area in 1992, wrote about her experience in a private letter that was later leaked to paranormal researchers. She said, "The equipment malfunctioned in a way I've never seen before or since. Not simple failure, but active corruption of the data. The readings we managed to capture showed what appeared to be hollow spaces, extending far deeper than any coal mine should reach, hundreds of feet below the surface, in patterns that defied normal mining practices. More disturbing were the anomalies that appeared to move between scans. When we returned the following day to verify the readings, we found our markers displaced and equipment tampered with, though there were no footprints or signs of human interference. Hart's school wouldn't pay for any more research at the site. Her early findings were never published in peer-reviewed journals, and she eventually moved on to studying geological formations in the American Southwest that weren't as controversial. According to records from the U.S. Forest Service, a selective timber harvest was planned for a part of the park that included Hollow Ridge in 1977. The operation was suddenly called off after the first survey. The official reason given was the nesting habitats of protected species, but no specific wildlife protection zones were set up. Internal documents obtained through a later Freedom of Information Act request show that 2 members of the survey team reported feeling very confused and hearing things that weren't there while working near the old mine site. In 1983, a group of spelunkers from the Tennessee Cave Survey tried to find and map any natural caves that were close to Hollow Ridge. Their expedition report has an interesting note. Thermal imaging revealed what appeared to be a cold spot approximately 200 feet below the surface near the coordinates of the former Blackwood operation. Temperature differential, inconsistent with groundwater or typical cave formations. Team reported equipment failures and unusual acoustic phenomena. Further investigation recommended, with improved equipment and expanded team. There was never a follow-up expedition. The Tennessee Cave Survey's records show that the project was marked as completed, but there is no explanation for why this changed. Isaiah Blackwood may have found exactly what he was looking for under the ridge, something new, game-changing, and priceless. The brothers may have crossed a line that was never meant to be crossed because they were so ambitious. Maybe what they found is still there, still waiting, and still listening from behind the concrete seal and the tons of dirt that fell. Or maybe it isn't contained at all anymore. In 1965, a hunter in the remote woods near Hollow Ridge said he found strange carvings on tree trunks that looked like the symbols Green wrote about in his letters that were found on the strange mineral samples. Park rangers looked into it, but they didn't find anything. Martin Graves, the hunter, said he had seen the markings until he died in 1967. His last words on the subject were, "They looked new, like they had been carved the day before, and they led away from the ridge, not toward it." The symbols Graves described, which were recorded in a statement to park officials but never photographed, were concentric circles with lines radiating outward, like a child's drawing of the sun, but more precise, and shapes like letters, but not in any alphabet I recognize. This description is very similar to markings that were said to have been found on stone fragments near the mine entrance, as Joseph Miller's full statement from 1879 shows. The Tennessee State Archives still have the records of the Blackwood Mining Company sealed off. They are classified as historically significant but restricted from public access. The official reason given is that there are still legal questions about mineral rights and property ownership that need to be worked out. Historians and journalists have always been turned away when they tried to get these papers. An environmental impact study was done in 1995 to check the quality of the air and water in the national park. One testing station, about 3 miles from Hollow Ridge, always showed strange readings, high levels of electromagnetic activity with no clear source. The anomaly was mentioned in early reports, but not included in the final published study. When asked about this difference, the main researcher said that the readings were caused by dirty equipment and did not show what was really going on in the environment. Dr. Samuel Carter, who was on the team that looked into the environment, later told coworkers that the explanation was made up. "We were told to take those results out of the report." He is said to have said at a private event in 1997, "Aside from national security concerns, no explanation was given. I've done similar studies in 3 other national parks, and I've never been asked to change data. Whatever is going on near Hollow Ridge, someone doesn't want it to be recorded." A geological survey done in 2001 using satellite images found another strange thing: a small but noticeable change in gravity around the old mine site. The finding was marked for more investigation, but later research was moved to other parts of the park. The original data was put into a different category and taken out of public databases. Dr. Rebecca Liu, the scientist who found the problem, moved to a different department in the U.S. Geological Survey not long after. The case of the Blackwood brothers is still unsolved. It is a footnote in Appalachian history, and a curiosity that comes up from time to time in academic papers on 19th century industrial development or regional folklore. Most people who hear this story think that the brothers and their friends died in a normal way, like in a cave-in, or by breathing in toxic gases that made them hallucinate before they died. Not many people think about what Frederick Walsh's last words mean, the pattern of silence that surrounds the case, or the strange steps that authorities are still taking to protect a mine that was closed nearly 150 years ago. People still go to Hollow Ridge after dark when locals say the silence gets deeper and they can feel something moving under the ground. It's something that has been waiting patiently for someone to break the thin barrier between this world and whatever lies beyond. A park ranger who wanted to stay anonymous told this story in 2003. "I've worked in 6 different national parks over 20 years. Every park has its legends and ghost stories. Most are just campfire tales, exaggerations built around mundane events. But Hollow Ridge is different. The accounts are too consistent, spanning too many years, from too many credible sources. And there's the circle to consider." When asked to explain the circle, the ranger said, "The dead zone has been slowly but surely getting bigger since it was first reported in the 1,960 seconds. It's now over 70 feet in diameter. Nothing grows there. Insects won't cross the line. GPS and radio signals don't work inside it. Most visitors who find it report feeling an immediate, overwhelming urge to leave. Those who resist this urge say they hear voices, often familiar voices, calling from just beyond the tree line. We were told to redirect hikers away from the area whenever possible, citing wildlife management or trail conditions. Never the truth." The last known incident happened in 2005, when 2 graduate students doing legal botanical research near Hollow Ridge went missing for 72 hours. They were found about 5 miles from where they were last seen, confused but not hurt. Both students said they couldn't remember anything that happened while they were gone. One of them quit the research project right after they got better, and the other finished the term, but switched their major from botany to computational linguistics because they suddenly became interested in how people communicate in ways other than language. The words carved into the back page of Isaiah Blackwood's journal, which was found, are almost too faded to read. "We thought we were opening a mine. We were opening a door. The mine at Blackwood is still closed. The site is now part of the forest again. The mountains keep their secrets. And maybe that's for the best for all of us." But one last document suggests that the story might not be over after all. The Knoxville Historical Society has a letter that Elizabeth Blackwood got in 1895, 16 years after her husband went missing. It is one of her personal papers. There is no return address or postmark on the envelope, which means it was probably delivered by hand. Experts who have looked at the handwriting say it looks a lot like Isaiah Blackwood's known samples, but with small changes that make it look like it was written under stress or in strange circumstances. The letter has only 3 lines. The door opens both ways. We found the way in. They found the way out. Listen for them in the silence between words. When the paper was tested in 1972, it was found to have trace amounts of an unknown mineral with strange electromagnetic properties. The letter is now sealed in a container lined with lead, and only a few people can get to it. In the fall, the wind still howls through the pines of Tennessee's Smoky Mountains, but it sounds different. People who have heard it say it carries echoes, but not of animals or storms. Instead, it carries something else, something that whispers from deep within the earth and waits. And sometimes, in the perfect quiet of Hollow Ridge, where birds never sing and leaves fall without making a sound, the waiting is over. The whispering gets louder, the air gets thinner, and for a moment the lines between here and there, now and then, and between those who disappeared and those who stayed, fade away like the morning mist. If the stories are true, you can still hear the Blackwood brothers working in their mine, digging, searching, and opening doors that should have stayed closed. You can hear the mechanical instruments that Thomas Green uses ticking and measuring. You can hear Frederick Walsh's warnings, but it's too late to listen. And below it all, getting louder every year, you can hear something else. It came in through the door they opened, and has been spreading, slowly but surely, through the thin places of the world. It knows your name and will whisper it to you when you're alone in the dark. There is no official record of these events kept by the rangers of Great Smoky Mountains National Park. People who want to know more about Hollow Ridge or the Blackwood Mine are sent to historical archives or geological surveys. The circle of dead earth keeps getting bigger, but no one notices or talks about it. The silence gets deeper, and for those who know how to listen, the whispering gets louder. There is a file in the government's bureaucratic maze of archives that says, "No access, no excavation, no recording equipment. Maintain containment protocols until a permanent solution can be found." The file is from 2007. The permanent solution is still not clear. The Blackwood brothers searched for riches under the mountains. They found something else, something that still echoes through the years, calling out to anyone who might open the door again. As you fall asleep tonight, pay close attention to the silence between your thoughts and the space between your heartbeats. You could hear them too. If you do hear a voice that sounds like your own coming from just beyond the wall, remember what happened to the Blackwood brothers. Once you open some doors, you can never really close them again.